Welcome to the CR Dynamics podcast. I'm Chad Rauch, operations leader, founder, and someone who believes that best businesses are built by people who understand systems, not just the markets. Today's guest spent 20 years inside the energy sector, Eaton Schneider Electric. He understands how critical assets work, how you protect a nuclear reactor, how you build measurement systems around something that absolutely cannot fail. And then something happened that made a life change. He tried to jump into healthcare and realized, wait a minute, this is kind of backwards. Victor Brown is the founder and CEO of Xcellent Life, a Nashville-based AI health platform. He has been building it for 10 years on his own, no dime from venture capital. After cashing out 401k to fund the company, he owns patents, originally held by Panasonic and Nokia. He is pre-approved for international expansion into Brazil and is doing something almost nobody else in the digital health is willing to do, treating the human body like a critical asset that it actually is. Today, we'll talk about the moment that pivot crystallized, the engineering mindset he took with him to build a reactive industry, the operating discipline that comes from 10 years of bootstrapping, and what it really means to build purpose rather than just a war chest. So, Victor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chad. It's definitely a pleasure to be on the show. I feel very privileged to have a conversation with you, and I always feel empowered when I'm having a chance to talk to other thought leaders. And as you mentioned, I didn't always operate in healthcare. It was a transition from the energy sector, and that transition, for it to make sense, I think you have to understand, I spent 20 years, where my subject matter expertise was being refined around how do you protect the critical energy asset. And it made a lot of sense for me to retire in that industry. I was compensated well, and I really enjoyed what I did.
Yeah.
But when my father was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, I naturally started becoming more involved and learning more about the healthcare system. And it made no sense whatsoever to me. Well, I was very alarmed and shocked and disappointed, quite frankly. Everything that I learned about the healthcare system was that it's reactionary. And I recognize that human vitality, human life is more critical than any asset in the energy sector you can be trying to protect. And so why would we take a reactionary approach to protecting human vitality, human livelihood? Made no sense to me. So I became very passionate about taking incredible technology and applying it to protecting the most critical asset, which is human life. And out of that was born the vision for Xcellent Life. And it's been an amazing ride. It continues to be a journey. And you made mention to this journey being done without venture capital. And so to a large extent, it's been a struggle to do that, but it's also been empowering because every single thing that you see inside the organization, I've had to have my hands on it. Now, in order to get to the next level, we're going to need venture capital. And so I do spend, at this point, a fair amount of my time looking to bring investors to the table. But while it's coming from a venture source, we did get some seed funding. We got 100K from an organization called Jumpstart Foundry. And
Okay.
we also received 100K from an accelerator program called Generator that's really a part of a fund funded by Northwestern Mutual. And Northwestern Mutual put a large amount of capital out there to really fund Black founders after the George Floyd incident. And they set up a number of programs after that. And my company was fortunate to get 100K from that program, which has certainly helped out. But to be where we are today, having 2 patents and having individuals supporting us the way we do is certainly not just luck. It's because of hard work and effort, but really because we're doing something that is much needed in healthcare. And I think the gravity around that is really attracting the right people. And so that's truly been a blessing.
No, you said it before, and kind of we'll say it again, is that when you find something that you find joy in, it propels you a lot further. You did it in your past, but now there's obviously a passion, a kind of mission critical sense to join into this new healthcare endeavor. And when you have that joy and that passion, it's no longer work, right? It's kind of something that,
Okay.
when it's work, it's kind of, you force yourself to get into it. You're not so, but you find the joy and passion in things. And that's where you found that out. And so when you made that jump,
Mhm.
we'll take away the bootstrap and kind of those activities away for a second. But when you made that jump to healthcare, what did you see in your dad's care that you knew you could fix? You mentioned in the past that
Sure.
the healthcare is completely backwards. Can you elaborate on
Mhm.
kind of what you saw you can do to help?
Right. So I guess before my dad, I would hear a lot about type 2 diabetes and how prevalent it was, but it wasn't really impacting anyone close to me in my circle. But when it started impacting my dad, so naturally I started learning a little bit more. And as I could see kind of his health, continue to degrade, and today he has early stages dementia, which certainly can be impacted by hardening of the arteries, things that are
Mhm.
associated with type 2 diabetes. To know that that is a condition that like is completely preventable based on lifestyle management, being aware of where you know your levels are in terms of blood sugar levels. All these things can be practically managed so that you never have to deal with type 2 diabetes. And
Okay.
seeing and understanding that it's just an alarm bell that like, hey, there are millions of people around the world that are suffering from just that one condition and they don't have to suffer from it. And then when you expand that out, type 2 diabetes is just one of the many conditions that are completely avoidable. So why aren't we as a society doing more to truly protect people so they have a high quality of life? And so that was the thing that really um, was kind of the profound understanding. It was the catalyst for me jumping into this with both feet.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. If you sit there and you realize that something's broken and you have the ability to kind of address it, we should,
Mhm.
right? I think that is our right as people, right as humans, to kind of find and go on. Otherwise, we're sheep falling into a system, and nobody wants that, especially when it's somebody dear and close to you. So it takes strength to go against the norm and make the changes. But you told me that healthcare is reactive. Symptoms
Mhm.
send us to the cabinet, to the doctor, to the hospital, and hopefully never the morgue, but we usually all end up there. Compare that to running a nuclear reactor. Nobody waits for the meltdown before they start fixing it. So walk me through the engineer mindset when you kind of talked about how you wanted to fix the system, in your case, your
Sure.
dad's symptoms.
Yeah, and I use nuclear reactor because it's like the thing that everyone can kind of fixate their mind around to understand the importance of that energy asset. But there are different types of energy assets, but by and large, we proactively protect them in the same way. So for
Mhm.
most of those assets, we are monitoring them in real time. So we're collecting an enormous amount of data, electrical quality data from those assets. So much information that we can tell you the operating parameters of those assets when they're operating healthy. Um, and when they're not operating healthy, we see those incremental changes in those numbers. And so we just go in, we perform corrective measures so that you don't get catastrophic failure. The human body, in theory, is very much like a very sophisticated electrical network. So, in principle,
That's true.
you can monitor and protect that in the same way. So, with all of these wearables coming online and all of these data sources that we're not tapping into, it is clear that we can today very easily understand human vitality in a much more granular way and identify signatures of illnesses well before they actually become those illnesses. And so that's what we're doing at Xcellent Life. I saw that as an opportunity years ago. That was before COVID was part of the equation. So when we initially started, a lot of people really didn't understand the value and thought we were a little bit crazy. And COVID hit, and everybody recognized the healthcare system was broken and that more digital solutions were needed. So that provided a little bump and a big support in terms of healthcare innovation in general. So I like to think the future is very bright for people who are taking solutions that provide a much more proactive approach to protecting human vitality.
No, that's very true. I think as we adopt more technology and technology becomes more into our lives, and we're not afraid of it. The AI movement is, oh, it's going to replace us all. They're going to be walking robots, and we're going to be living in the Matrix society here, not too far. But I mean, that's the dystopian future. But reality is, the AI can help us. The advancement that technology can help us in everyday movement. But what happens in the gap between when the data exists and then when the doctor sees it? There's kind of, it's there already. How do we get that front and center, and how do we close that gap?
Sure. So there are a lot of things that are happening now that give us incredible opportunities. One, uh, even if there was not a gap, and instantly the doctor had information in front of them, you still are held hostage by the capacity that that doctor has to have to look at that and analyze it when they already have kind of more patience than they can really effectively spend time to evaluate. So somehow, if you layer in between that some kind of middle intelligence that can help kind of pre-analyze the data and give that doctor insights instead of like going through all of the data by themselves, then you put yourself a little ahead of the curve. So that's where the real short-term opportunity is to take data and turn it into information and do that faster. And you can do that at scale, especially leveraging AI. To your point, AI can be a really, really critically important tool to advancing what we can do in wellness. We're using AI at Xcellent Life. And yeah, I think the adoption of AI-based, AI-empowered tools is going to grow substantially in the very near future. And so while we might be on the cutting edge right now and kind of I say this, even though we've been around for a little while, we're still kind of the new kid on the block. I think that the market is moving in a direction of our favor.
No, I'd agree with that. And I think you call your approach the real-time human diagnostics. And
Yes, yes.
when you use that technique, you call it the wellness as a currency, right? So break down that someone hearing it for the first time. What does a member of the Excellent Life program actually experience? What are the takeaways
Right.
they
So
get living at?
sure. So we wanted to empower people. Again, I think the healthcare system as it exists today is broken, and more people are suffering from that broken system. So how do you fix something that's broken? Well, you don't start by, plugging in kind of holes where it's broken. You start by stepping back and looking at, if I had to reconstruct the entire system, how would I start? And so for me, that means that we want to empower people because people who are suffering from health, when they're having to kind of attach to a broken system, you never get to the greatest outcomes. You never get to the highest quality of life. So, in order to do that, we wanted to give people the tools they have in front of them to really empower their health. And that starts with information. So, if I have visibility to metrics that are really important to me that are going to shape my future, then at least I can make the decisions that are informed. I have that. And so that's one thing that our platform does. We examine a bunch of health related information from a variety of sources, and we simplify that data and provide it to individuals in a way that they can easily understand so they have that information and act on it. The other thing that we recognize is that you mentioned wellness as a currency. We have learned that it's not enough to know, well, if I eat a whole bunch of high cholesterol food, I'll be unhealthy. We know that we have that knowledge, but when does that stop people from eating high cholesterol food? We still have our lifestyles. So, in order to effectively change behavior, you have to incentivize people. And our approach to incentivizing people is meant to be really engaging, really fun, but really actually move the needle of behavior change. And wellness as a currency is essentially allowing a large population of people to compete for a larger monetary reward. So we have gamified health, where when people are competing and they show actual measurable improvements based on their own baseline, they get points toward winning a competition. So now imagine a large population of people who are working to improve their health, But the winner of that competition for that week wins $5,000, $10,000. That bigger carrot at the end of the stick drives much greater behavior change than getting a badge, coupon, discount, or a small amount of money that has to go back to a health savings account. It's a lot more excitement around winning more money. So that's the difference.
No, that makes sense. I mean, granted, after this call, I'm probably going to go warm up some deep fried food. No, I'm just kidding. But it's the behaviors that you're talking about, and really, the best motivation behind the behavior is the need behind the reason for the change. And you said the fact of having somebody incentivized, the health savings account's great. You can carry with you, you might grow a little dollars, but if it can go directly to your bank account and you're improving your health with that, that's a double win. So how does the competing for $5,000 work more than the $1,500 benefits package does not? How does that angle play out? Where do the funds come from to support that? If it's coming out, is it coming out of my paycheck that I'm just saving it down the road in a different way, or is my boss actually paying for me not to eat that double cheeseburger later on? How does that work out for you?
Yeah, so if you think about it in a way where, let's say that you have this same pot of incentives. So that same pot of incentives gives each individual person $1,500 across the year. I'm employed at that place. If I stand back and I look at that, I'm getting a salary. How much is $1,500 really to me? It's like that significant. Let's say I make, the average salary. Let's say I make, almost, 45, 50K a year, whatever the average is today. It's $1,500 going to make a meaningful difference in my life? Well, probably not. That's not going to change my behavior. Let's say I make that same average salary, but instead of getting $1,500 across the year, that week I have a chance to get $5,000. Which one is going to motivate me more to action? So it's the same bucket of incentives, can be funded in the same way, can be funded in flexible ways, whether it's the employer paying for it, whether that's their employees paying a smaller amount to participate in that competition to help fund it, whether that's sponsors that are paying for it. The deal is that you get more behavior change. And I describe it as creating herd behavior. And here's another example.
I like the herd behavior aspect.
You create herd behavior. Like if I have $1, let's say I have $100 and I got 100 people around me standing in a circle, and I tell them, hey, I want you to run toward me as quickly as you can. And when you get there, I'm going to give you $1. You'll find a smaller percentage of the population that's going to run just because they're competitive. They're not running for the dollar. They're just competitive people. The people who probably need to run, they're going to sit back and like, $1's not worth it. Well, same circle of people, same $100. You say, hey, I want you to run toward me. And the first one that gets here, you're going to get $100. First of all, the incentive is a little bigger. But then if you leave it at that, the people who are less healthy, they might feel discouraged. Well, we can't run as fast. That's why you waited so they stand a better chance of winning. You make the people who are less healthy, they're closer to you. And so essentially that's what we do in the program, because we measure improvement based on your own baseline. So the least healthy people have a greater opportunity to improve so they can acquire more points. So when you level the playing field like that, you're really affecting the population that's costing the most for your organization, and also the population who needs it the most. And that's the approach that we take, that we label as wellness as a currency.
That's a very unique way. What kind of, as you're telling that story, what popped up in the game, you mentioned you have the baseline where and there are improvements from their own baseline. Now, this may sound bad, and I feel sorry for some of the viewers on here, but remember the show The Biggest Loser?
I do. I do.
They were overweight, and their goals were to improve week over week. Well, obviously the larger people had the bigger chance of losing more weight week over week. Sounds like the same scenario, but you're just judging where they're at. So the further you are from a healthy baseline, the easier it is to make those incremental improvements to get there. The chances are now you're motivated because now it's health, but incentivized. the
That is absolutely
gamification
right.
within
Hmm.
your, so that's a great unique way of putting the health front. It's not a game show, but it's still a game in itself to improve your health. That's an
Right,
excellent way of putting it.
right. And you've got 20% of the population, the ones who are least healthy, that are causing organizations 80% of the cost. So if you can incentivize that 20%, the
Hmm.
impact you have is significant. And yeah, that makes sense to target it that way. At least we think so.
No, it does. And I mean, that 80/20 rule can go across everywhere. So I mean, it's good to
Mhm.
see it even comes up in this scenario. Everybody talks 80/20%. So no, that's excellent. So, as you roll this out and the claims that you come up with is there's $950 per employee, right? In their savings on the wellness program. That kind of number gets the CFO's attention. He's like, you got a lot of people, that's a lot of money. But how does that number stick when you front the CFO that's heard other wellness pitches before? How do you get that culture shift in his mind to make it beneficial?
Right. So there are really two scenarios that we run into. One scenario is where they're not really doing anything to affect wellness across the population. Then it becomes a matter of educating them about where their costs are and how that bubbles up. That can be kind of a long educational process, but then they see that anecdotally, okay, well, hey, if we improve our health, it's going to have this impact. And we just walk them through the
Mhm.
numbers. So educational process. The other scenario is where they're already doing something, they have some experience there, and whether it's been a good or a bad experience, what we've seen is that they're not getting the greatest results they could be getting. So we might be competing against a notion that we're no different than what they already have. So we can't get this higher value, higher return on investment compared to what they're already utilizing. When that is the scenario, we focus in on what makes us different, our different approach, and why the behavior change component is really the culprit for the limited results that they've been getting. And so 9 times out of 10, they're going to look at across the population and say, hey, we've been using this solution, but our users don't use it. Well, yeah, well, that's your problem. They're not using it. And if they did this, don't you feel like it would be more exciting to your population if we did this? And when we get the head nods and anecdotally they understand why our approach is better, that's when we can kind of gain ground and start, getting some traction with it and get a yes.
And so when you're having that conversation with the CFO, what's the question that he asks you that tells you he's going to buy it versus says he's like going to pass on it? What's that key phrase you look for?
Yeah, they start talking about what is it like to deploy it? Like how much does it cost to deploy and maintain it? What does that look like? So
Okay.
in my mind, that's telling me that they're thinking about, okay, if we were to go with them, like what are the costs associated with saying yes to getting that deployed out into our environment? What is the training? What is the maintenance? What all these things? That's a
Mhm.
good question here.
I'll listen to that for my next conversations when they want to deploy me into their operations. But
Yeah.
no, I mean that's very good insight. I mean, it's kind of that understanding that sales cycle in a sense, because at this point you are acting as a salesperson. What are those key takeaways? But
Sure.
the product is its value is what you're selling. You're selling in a sense, a cost reduction service. You're one
Mhm.
of the larger expenses for any business is usually the benefits program for their employees. And you have the unhealthy workforce, their costs are going to increase, their premiums are going to increase that they're taking up, as well as the employees kind of contributions to that. So no, that's a great angle. Switching gears a little bit, we talked about, I mean, everything you got there. Let's talk a little bit about kind of that early stages and that your rigor and your discipline around the bootstrap aspect.
Sure.
What was the constraint that actually taught you about running the business? That early on
Right.
you're bootstrapped. You told me that there were no software companies that grew out to be unicorns without having some $2 to $5 million. But here you are 10 years later.
Mhm.
So you've done something right. But what did that teach you early on?
Yeah, so a few things. Outside of knowing how to navigate well in the software space, because I've done this for 30 years now, also it takes a fair amount of pain tolerance. Uh, so I don't know if that's
Thanks,
something that
Stan.
you can condition yourself to have. You might unfortunately be born with it. I think
Mhm.
I fall victim to that. So it's a gift and a curse. And also you have to be doing something that you're really passionate about, where you see purpose in it, because along the way you're going to run into situations and scenarios that are, very difficult to get past. And I think it won't make sense for you to endure that and then get through it unless you're doing something that's very purposeful to you.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing is that because I did spend so much time in the software world, I became familiar with how to get a few things done in really the lowest cost way, possible way, because I would understand the hard costs associated with development. So when I got quotes for getting anything outsourced, I could push back on it. And I had
Mm.
worked with overseas, technology partners for
Yeah.
years. So I knew how to kind of negotiate that. I knew how to manage that. So we had an early stage product built out at a very, very low cost and really early in the process. And I also think I benefited from having built a professional network, just working for a large company. And so there's been support to come from a variety of different sources that has been helpful. If I had to give like advice for someone that was starting on that journey,
Mhm.
I would say one, do something that you're passionate about, because it'll help you get through those hard moments. You would push through it. But also in today's world, in particular with AI, that the bar is higher now if you're going to try to raise capital. You truly need to be generating some revenue. You truly need to have a product, and you can easily build a product leveraging AI. So I have not done hardcore coding in many years, but I did code for a while, so I understand technology. I coded,
Okay.
I've tested, I've done a lot of things,
Mhm.
but I've stepped back into coding now using vibe coding, and I've been like a kid in a candy store. So I would recommend anyone going down this path for technology development to make sure they understand vibe coding, to use that to build their platform. So I'll do that. I'll pay a dev ops person to deploy it in a production environment. But I've really drastically cut our cost. And I can say that I'm talking about that specifically for engineering, but in
Mhm.
every aspect of the business, I've been able to find creative ways to cut costs, which is why we've been able to stick around for, as long as we have without getting that infusion of capital that we are looking for now, by the way, investors
Mhm.
that are out there and listening. But
Mhm.
yeah, I believe that, any company that has done well that has the enterprise class solution and software base, they probably raised between 2 and 5 million in the first, probably 5 years easily. That much. Outside of that, I love for someone to show me a different example where someone has bootstrapped their way to becoming a unicorn. I hear people talk about bootstrapping, but again, I would say there's a big difference when you're bootstrapping as a multi-hundredaire versus when you're bootstrapping as a multi-millionaire. It's not the same bootstrapping. So yeah, I just, I won't belabor the point, but
Yeah.
you have to have some tenacity to get through the process.
Well, I think you also have to have a keen understanding of where your limitations are. You mentioned
You do.
it kind of, you have to understand where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are at, where to ask for help, but then also keeping it under control, like you mentioned, and really being creative at the early
Hmm.
stages. Um,
Right.
you know, there's so kind of along those same lines, we talked about in our initial pre-call about, and this I really thought I love this kind of distinction, the difference between sales and
Hmm.
business development. Sales are faster, technical, kind of reward driven, but
Hmm.
that business development is slower, strategic in a sense, relationship based in a
Hmm.
way. Um, what is that framework to you use to know how your business actually needs? How do you know when to put the sales gas on or the development gas?
Yeah, I think in the best organizations, they're operating in parallel when you have the resources to do so. And that it's always best, if I'm leading those organizations,
Mm.
I'm placing people where their strengths are. And for me personally, I know I'm more of a business development person versus a salesperson because I'm truly relationship driven. I've had a little success in the past being who I am, which is naturally, getting to know people, people getting to know me, wanting to show that we can offer value, but first understanding what their needs are and not being so driven by like closing a deal, meeting a number, meeting a quota. That's not, my psychology, my psyche. But you need that. You need people in your organization that, they need that instant gratification. They need to see that they met that metric. And in combination, where you have someone that's more sales focused versus someone who that's building strategic relationships, kind of greasing the pipeline, creating these bigger opportunities, I think those organizations are really, clicking on all cylinders. And that's where the resources come in because right now, because I'm not so salesy, that's going to be an area of weakness. I have to overcompensate and try to do my best in that area, but that's not a natural fit for me. If I had the resources, I would just bring someone in that is really awesome in that area, and I could focus on doing the things that I have done historically to do well. Where it's going to be going to the trade shows, doing the speaking engagements, doing the dinners, setting the
Mm.
stage for when someone sees Excellent Life, like, oh, I know what you guys do, because of some thought leadership activity I've been a part of. They have been able to understand the value that we bring to the table and what makes us unique. So then when that salesperson comes in, that quick pitch and that fast movement is connecting up well to that strategic kind of brand recognition that we've already laid out.
No, I mean, I think that's a great strategy, not only for startups, but just in general. I mean, you're setting the table, as you said,
Sure.
for down the road. I mean, every business has different cycles, from a product life or kind of even a sales cycle standpoint. But anytime you can have your name out there in advance, that salesperson coming in has that much easier sell. Now, in that scenario, I would rather be the sales guy because then I don't have to put all the work in and the effort, and you're going to get the quick takeaways because that's the world we live in, where all that instant gratification. But in the
Right.
real end, it's really that business development, that relationship aspect. If you don't have that up front, right, you're not going to, there's no need to have the sales guy in the back end. So,
Right.
the one
Yeah.
thing that kind of that questions my mind is, what's the higher than that most founders get wrong when they're still in that business development stage, but they think they're really in the sales stage? So if you were going to go back and hire, or who do you think, where those mistakes come from?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times, especially uh, engineering kind of mindset founders, they can fall in love with the product and think that the features and the functions of the product are better than the competing competitors.
Okay.
That may be true. It doesn't matter. Like they can have a better product all day, every day, and it will not matter if they can't connect up to the decision makers. So it's great to have a good product, a great solution. Got to understand the market, got to understand your customer base to have that be part of the equation. That's fundamentally critical. But once you get that done, you have to, especially when you have an enterprise class solution, it's a larger deal. You have to be out in front of those decision makers. And a lot of times those deals are won at the dinner table. Those deals are won uh, on the golf course. Those deals are won in the clubhouses, the arenas, the sporting events, all of the places where you can talk about things that are adjacent to business, but not so much business, but develop those real relationships. Because I can guarantee you, I don't care how good your product is, we think our product is awesome. But let's assume that they have a better product. A competitor would never, I think, outcompete someone that's doing dinner with the decision maker and they've only been doing a Zoom call and come with a product. I don't think in the world that we live in my experience, that would ever happen. So I would spend budget on getting in front of people. Um, if you have the budget, get on a plane, do thought leadership events,
Mhm.
build your brand, position yourself as an authority. so that, you can speak to your decision makers as peers and as like a consultant as opposed to someone that's just trying to provide a product, because that's not going to help you stand out.
That's a very good takeaway. And I think when you hear a salesman, you always hear the used car salesman analogy, the
Mhm.
slick back hair, the sleazy guy that's going to show you the Ferrari in the lot, but then sell you the Pinto in the back because that's what it was. So that goes back to what we mentioned, that business development aspect, that relationship focus that drives a lot of decisions. And I agree 100% that those are the best conversations to have. I think the best
Right.
conversations are outside of a typical meeting environment. Usually the meeting environment is where you close the deal, but the
Mhm.
decision was made outside of that of that
Sure.
avenue. So, very great insight, very good understanding from where you are. Just kind of want to provide a little bit of a wrap up here, Victor, if you don't mind, because I think it was a great
Sure.
conversation and generally useful for myself, and I think a lot of the listeners here are going to understand kind of what it takes to make the giant move, go from one industry to the next. But let me reflect back on a few kind of takeaways here. I think we all can agree that healthcare is backwards. We're reactionary, not proactive. We treat it, and after we find out about it, we don't try to prevent it up front. So the monitoring system is the structural failure inside the industry. You don't get your blood pressure checked until you have high blood pressure. At that point,
Right.
there's not much to do. Um, your engineering mindset does transfer. It's how you look at the problem, how you think about it, how you implement it, and treating the body as an asset, which it should be, is kind of an excellent way of looking at it with the monitoring, the measuring, and all those closed feedback loops that are a great way of handling it. And we'll call it the big digital health idea is coming up these days. Um, and then third, kind of the last thing that we talked about is that bootstrapping. Yeah, everybody wants to have that pot of gold to help business, but it doesn't have to be successful. You don't need to be having that large pot to be successful. Your business development, that thought leadership, that brand, that relationship building is really where survival kicks in and kind of develop those relationships that will help you along the way. And that's kind of a very disciplined approach. A lot of people jump the gun
It
a
is.
bit. You gotta stick to the process. And it sounds like you mastered
Mhm.
that process to a certain point, especially with things upcoming down the horizon, your expansion down into Brazil. I mean, not everybody goes that route. So that's an excellent kind of to your business and kind of how you handle it up to this point. So good luck to you. I do got one final question for you though. All right, I'm
Sure.
gonna throw it, I ask this to every guest that's on here, a little different for everybody, but what's next for you? What challenges are out there in the horizon that you want to tackle?
Right. So for me, I just believe in the importance for myself personally as a part of my purpose. When I'm no longer here, I want to be sure that the time that I was here, I made the world a better place. So when I project out a really successful, excellent life, like in a grand scale, and maybe someone else is at the helm, maybe I'm just on the board. When I visualize that, I visualize myself actually getting into helping to fund early stage companies and
Okay.
being on the other side of the table and not really doing it as a part of the VC model. I don't, you know, I believe I would use kind of a different model, but somehow playing a role in getting early companies started. That's what I would love to do in the next phase of my life.
From how you handled Excellent Life to where you're
Mhm.
at now, I think you'd be a valuable mentor. I think any startup would be lucky to have you on their board as an advisor or even just as a mentor, because obviously you've grown something and it's going to continue to grow and be successful down the road. So, Victor, thank you for your time today. It was great. Loved the whole conversation. A lot of great insights. For anyone listening, Excellent Life is at excellentlife.com. Links will be in the show notes. Victor, really appreciate your time today. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Chad. It's been a pleasure.